warm welcome to today's video on justice and fairness. This video is structured in the following way. We will first look at one example to make you reflect on the notion of justice. We will then see terminology and further details, and at the end we will see that different questions are addressed in different fields and sometimes by providing similar answers. The guiding questions at the beginning of this video should first of all make you reflect on these challenges, these problems right from the beginning. On the other hand, they will be answered by the end of this video. So what are those questions? First of all, what is the relationship of law and justice? Is there a definition of justice, respectively fairness? Is there any difference between justice and fairness? And next question, is there a difference between equality and non-discrimination? And the last question, what is positive discrimination? As you can see from this picture from the US Supreme Court, there is the motto on top which says equal justice under law. And this implies that justice and law are two different concepts, but ideally they overlap because law should be just. And if we have equal justice under law, so of course that's the legal perspective that law is supreme to justice, but again, those are two concepts. Now, let's consider the following example. Imagine there are 3 children and you have only one flute to give to one of those 3 children. And now to which child would you give the one and only flute? Should it be Anne because she knows how to play the flute? Should it be Bob because he's the one child who does not yet have a toy on his own? Or should it be Carla because she produced the flute? If you want, you can now pause the video and reflect on this question, which will be answered on the next slide. Now, first of all, I have to say there is no right or wrong answer. So depending on to whom you would give the flute, this answer might be influenced or reflected towards the background of different concepts. So if any one of you has decided to give the flute to Carla, that would be an approach according to Aristotle, where the idea is to give the flute to the one who knows how to beautifully play that instrument, so to contribute to further development and human facilities. Still giving it to Anne, but based on a different reason, we could also, or this answer could also be influenced from a utilitarian perspective. So this idea to increase overall happiness. And if you have ever heard someone not playing well the flute, you might agree. If you would decide to give it to Bob, that could be seen as an egalitarian approach, so to this idea of equality to everybody. And the last one, if you would give it to Carla, because she's the one who has actually produced the flute, that would be this idea of, or this libertarian conception of just acquisition and possession. Now, let's look into further details concerning this notion of justice. First of all, justice could be a virtue, meaning that it's your inner disposition, so you're not forced by any external pressure, so the fear of being punished or whatever, but if it's your ethos, so to say, to see justice as a virtue. Justice could also be a normative concept, meaning that it regulates the living together of humans in a society. We can then also distinguish two notions of justice. First of all, in horizontal situations. So, for instance, if the state needs to decide to whom of the citizens to whom to give certain scarce resources, of course, that should be based on objective criteria, which should be applied in a uniform way and not in an arbitrary way. So that would be for vertical situations. On the other hand, in horizontal situations, so if you imagine two people on an equal level, two peers, so to say, and if you buy a product from someone else, justice would mean that whatever you give in return for a product, so a certain amount of money, so to say, that there should be a just situation of what you get and what you get in return. As we can see, we also have a procedural notion of justice, which could be linked to the question of the presumption of innocence. Also in a proceeding that you need to listen to the other part, to the counter argument, so to say. And another example from John Rawls, which very much explains this procedural way of defining justice. Just consider you have a piece of cake and it should be divided into two pieces for two persons. How to guarantee that each of those two persons gets the same size of the cake? Well, if you have one to cut it into two pieces and the other one could select, then the first one cutting the cake into pieces would be very much motivated to equally divide it into two pieces which are equal in size. Now, if we look at this other picture, as you can see, three persons watching this sports game. They have three boxes which are different in size. In this situation, we have one person who cannot watch the game because he's and the box, they are not tall enough. So would we call that a situation of discrimination? Not really, because maybe they brought those boxes themselves, so we are not discriminating against someone else. Now, if we do it this way, this could be, as you can see, this idea of affirmative action or positive discrimination, so that we change the situation from the outside. We redistribute the boxes in a way that now they can all watch the game and look over this wooden fence. In this example, we do not worsen the situation of the tall guy. He can still watch the game. For him, it would not matter. But the guy on the right-hand side, he can now watch the football game. We call that positive discrimination or affirmative action. We also have seen on this previous slide the two notions of equality and equity, where we now need to shed some further light. First of all, equality. That's this idea of treating people in an equal way. If we take a legal perspective, we would call that non-discrimination. So that can be seen as two sides of one coin. And equality means that you should not treat people in a different way based on artificial criteria. Of course, there can be situations, exceptions so to say, where you would treat people in a different way, so we call that reasons of justification. The second notion, equity, on the other hand, and I may quote, equity fills the gap between legal justice and absolute justice. The content of equity consists of those judgments required to reconcile the former with the latter. So what does that mean? If law is not just enough because it has to provide certain abstract concepts for a lot of cases in the future, there might be gaps, and that's where equity should fill those gaps in order to provide a just situation. So as you can see it from the second quotation, so equity is a part of morality, and very often law knows that it cannot provide an adequate solution. So that's when we have concepts as fair discretion, good faith, or good morals, where there is more flexibility, so to say, to offer a just solution under law. Very often, where can we find the notion of equity? Very often in common law countries, like for instance in England or so to say the UK. Justice and fairness. We've already seen that justice can be seen as distributive justice, but also retributive justice, so the punishment for wrongdoing. And of course, justice can be more of a philosophical concept, can be a legal concept. We can also find it in religion, theology, and so on. Fairness, as you can see, very often is seen as a synonym to justice, but if we qualify a situation as unjust or as unfair, then qualifying a situation as unjust would be a stronger form of condemning it. As you have seen, it can be very challenging to define justice, and there are two very prominent examples. So there is one book called A Theory of Justice by John Rawls. As you can see, a very comprehensive book, a benchmark in this field, so to say. There is another book, a more recent one, called Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do by Michael Sandel, which is a very good book in order to introduce you to the concepts of justice, of philosophy, of ethics, and related topics. So, as you can see, we have law, we have ethics, in between we have values as a bridge, so to say, and on bottom of the slide we have justice as one of the values of the EU. So different concepts or different fields, but in the end, as it was mentioned in this book of Michael Sandel, what's the right thing to do? Very often that's the ultimate question which should be answered. So that's, besides those two books, the literature mentioned in today's videos, and now you know. So what's the relationship of law and justice? As we've seen today, two concepts which ideally overlap, but it's, as we did, equal justice under law, so two different concepts. Concerning definition of fairness, respectively justice, we have seen the example of the flute. So there might be various answers influenced by various philosophies, and we've seen those two books by Rawls and Sandel. What is fairness, and is it different from justice? As we have seen, justice sometimes is used as a stronger wording in order to qualify something as unjust. It would be stronger than only to qualify it as unfair, but very often those two concepts are used as synonyms. Two other terms, non-discrimination and equality, can simply be seen as two sides of the very same coin. So if we positively say you should treat someone equal, or if we say negatively you should not discriminate, that's basically the same in the end. And we have also seen the concept of positive discrimination, also called affirmative action, where we have seen the example with the three persons trying to watch the sports game with the three boxes, where we try to improve the situation of someone who is disprivileged in order to make her situation better, to improve it. The question, of course, then is if we take the taller box from the other one, does that cause a disadvantage to this person or not? So that would be one very important question for affirmative action. So hopefully you now know more about the two concepts of justice and fairness.